I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Jessica Borza is a strategic advisor in her own consulting firm. She is also the, I believe, the founding director of the Mahoning Valley Manufacturing Coalition, which brings together manufacturing leaders, career technical schools, and other community organizations to enable better communication and collaboration and ensure a strong pipeline of talented workers in their region. So welcome, Jessica, to come and speak, and thank you for being here.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I am always excited to be in rooms of manufacturers talking with their partners about creative solutions and how to solve their workforce needs, so appreciate the opportunity to be here. Give me 1 second. My printer wasn't cooperating with me this morning, so I'm using my laptop instead. So John and I were on the complete same page as we were thinking about remarks for today. I think that it's always helpful in this crazy labor market to start with some context as we're trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Where are all of these workers? What is in their minds? How do we get their attention? How do we motivate them? And how do we get them into manufacturing careers? So those were some fantastic statistics. The other statistic that wasn't mentioned that I thought I would throw out here, because I think it's a perception at least that I had, I was at the Ohio Manufacturers Association Workforce Summit a couple of weeks ago, and Lieutenant Governor John Husted was speaking, and he likes to also set the stage with facts and data. And one of the things, 2 points that he shared were a statistic about unemployment. So he said, as of that week, so it was the last week in October, a couple weeks ago, there were more than 10,000 fewer people on unemployment than before COVID, which just blew my mind, right? You think like everybody's on unemployment, that's part of, one of the factors, but it was 60,000 before COVID, and now it's resting at about 50,000 people on unemployment. The same is true for people on TANF, so public assistance. Fewer now than before the pandemic. So we know that there are other factors at work. There are other things happening. John mentioned some of those. Demographics in general are working against us. We knew that was trending that direction before the pandemic, and now there have been some other factors, that are happening, including some of those lifestyle choices. Another factor is women have been impacted, not just because of childcare issues, but because several of the major industries that you saw a majority of women working in were impacted particularly by the pandemic. So if you think about service, retail, tourism, there are a lot of women working in those industries that were impacted. So for manufacturers, that's an opportunity. So we can find a silver lining in all of this if, again, we can get their attention, we can think about what job quality job quality means to women and means to millennial women, but it is going to require us to think differently. So we just can't complain about it, right? I mean, we've done that. We're all guilty of it. I certainly am. We've got to do something about it. And so that's what's great about having a forum like this of like-minded partners, manufacturers working together with each other and with other partners to figure out what are some of the solutions that we can do together. So that's kind of the same sentiment that our founder in the Mahoning Valley had 10 years ago when he founded the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. So Brian Benyo is our founder. He and his brother own a couple of manufacturing facilities in the Mahoning Valley, Brilex Industries. They employ about 300 people probably collectively, I think, and growing. But basically what he said 10 years ago, he was looking at his businesses, their growth trajectory, and he became concerned about the workforce. He was looking at those forecasts and realizing that the workforce really wasn't going to support what they really wanted to do. So he basically said, we can't wait for DC and Columbus to figure this out. We can't point fingers at our education system. We as manufacturers need to own this issue and figure out what we're going to do differently in order to make a difference in our community and in turn, really come up with solutions that are going to support our businesses. So he felt like manufacturer leaders really needed to step up and find out, new and better ways to tackle these issues. So, that kind of represents that new and different way to, think now about how do we tap into different talent pools? How do we train differently? We need to be quick about, if we get the attention of a prospective employee, we need to think about what are our recruiting practices. We can't screen them for 3 weeks anymore. We've got to capture them, get them in the door, get them onboarded, get them connected, make them feel like there is a sense of community within your organizations, that they feel welcomed and supported, and that they have room for advancement. That's a key differentiator in manufacturing when you compare manufacturing against other industries. If you think about retail and tourism and service industries, the advancement opportunities are fewer and far between, and they're not as obvious. So manufacturers are, I think, some of the best at identifying individual potential and nurturing those individuals in different advancement paths. But I think we do a lousy job of making that transparent and clear, and using that in recruitment, and using that from day one with new employees so that they can see that there's additional on-the-job training, there are additional opportunities for upskilling, whether it be through apprenticeships or other classes that are here at Kent State and at the Career Center. So we need to find different ways to find them, to recruit them, to onboard them, and to retain them. And it's going to require each of individual businesses to reevaluate your practices, but also it's going to require collective solutions. This is a bigger problem than any one manufacturer can solve, and that's really what industry sector partnerships are all about. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, is this model of public-private partnerships led by industry. And I'll just tell you our story from the Mahoning Valley, and then be happy to answer any questions and serve as a resource as we try to figure this out together. So I first just want to kind of get a sense of the room. So how many of you have heard the term industry sector partnerships? Well, that's good news. All right, good. So I guess since some people didn't raise their hands, I'll just go ahead and level set with a quick explanation about what an industry sector partnership is, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition. So an industry sector partnership is essentially, could be this group. Basically, it's a group of like-minded industry leaders. In our case, of course, it's manufacturing, coming together to understand what their common needs are. So recognizing that they will have more influence in the community, be able to have a stronger voice when trying to get the word out if they work together. So they come together and they kind of lay out what the various needs are, get pretty specific. I know in the early days of MVMC, we talked about the need for machinists. That was our #1 priority. Now we also have added industrial maintenance and welder fitters, and now robotics and automation to the list. But essentially trying to figure out, recognizing that there's individual on-the-job training that will differ from company to company, but where are the common needs, and what are our biggest priorities? And then they engage their partners. So it requires, our belief is that everybody in the community has a role to play in an industry sector partnership, and it's going to take all of us rolling up our sleeves together in order to really make the impact that we need to move the needle, and especially in these challenging times. So the partners that we believe are important to have in an industry sector partnership are, of course, K-12, career and technical centers, community colleges, universities, workforce boards, community organizations, community action agency, Goodwill, others that have the reach into individuals that could potentially become our employees. And so basically, industry comes together, identifies their needs, sets the priorities, and then engages with partners to understand or to identify strategies, to problem solve together and figure out how we can work in new and different ways in order to attack these problems. And then there's a neutral intermediary. So that's the role that I play. So I'm sort of a facilitator. I help the manufacturers come together and figure out what their needs and priorities are. And then I link out with community organizations, invite them to the table, and then I become a project manager. So I make sure that the solutions that we identify that we want to work on together and tackle together actually get moving. We're all about action, and that we see results. So this model isn't new, this model of industry sector partnerships. It's been around for probably 10 or 15 years, but it's proven to be effective. So there's research out there. If you Google industry sector partnerships, you'll see a lot of literature about it. In Ohio, we are really leading the nation in terms of adoption of industry sector partnerships. MVMC has been around for 10 years. When we first started, there were 2 or 3 others across the state. The Ohio Manufacturers Association, when they were trying to figure out what to do about workforce about 5 years ago, they were looking around for different solutions, and they landed on industry sector partnerships as kind of the operating system to be able to, tackle some of these issues. And so through their work now, there are 13 manufacturing industry sector partnerships across the state of Ohio that are endorsed, that all kind of meet a certain level of criteria, and many others that are in early stages of development. And what's beautiful about that from my standpoint is it allows us to benchmark against each other. We get to compare notes. We make sure we're not reinventing the wheel. Sometimes we pool our resources so we can hire a high-priced marketing firm to put out some snazzy materials that we couldn't afford if we were doing it by ourselves. So that's been really helpful to us, and we're getting some traction with the state as well. So the Ohio Department of Development, the Lieutenant Governor have actually, there's legislation that supports industry sector partnerships and some funding out there to help you stand up an industry sector partnership. So there's a recognition that this is something that's worthwhile, and again, that public-private partnership. So now that we all know what an industry sector partnership is, let me kind of tell you our story. So as I mentioned, 10 years ago, Brian Benyo said we need to do something different. He started to talk with his network of other manufacturers that he did business with, his suppliers, his competitors, and they came together and said, yes, we agree. So we ended up with 13 original, and quickly it became 20 founding members who said, yes, we're going to commit to doing something differently. And what their commitment looked like was 3 years. They said, we'll come to the table for 3 years to try to figure this out. We're also going to commit financially. So I think at that time it was a 3-year commitment for $3,000 a year, knowing that they would need some seed money to get their act together, get it staffed, come up with a plan, and then be able to implement that plan. So those became our founding members. We went through kind of a strategic planning process, a summit much like this one, engaged partners. We had about 400 people in a room at one point, and came up with our priorities and our action plan. And that's really been our roadmap over time. We refresh it every year, and our priorities adjust somewhat slightly. But we really started with that philosophy. As I said, everyone has a role to play. And so we made sure that the community was engaged. They knew what our challenges were and what the opportunities were, what the career pathways were in manufacturing. They helped us to become champions, and they also said, we have services, we have programs, we have resources. Tell us how we can adjust them to better meet your needs, manufacturers. So we continue to operate as an industry-led group. Our board is made up completely of manufacturers, and we engage those partners on a regular basis. Our manufacturers are champions for every single solution or strategy that we put into place, and we've developed a strong reputation for action, which has served us well. So I'm going to tell you now a little bit about some of the things that we're doing, because that's really what you care about. I think it's important, though, to know about the infrastructure and the collaboration, because that's the framework on how we get stuff done. And it's, kind of the glue and what's held us together over the past 10 years. So we first have really dug into career pathways, and we take a systems approach. So we look at those occupations that I mentioned that were kind of most critical for us. And in the early days, we started by bringing our subject matter experts together. So bringing companies' best machinists in the room and talking about the skills and competencies that they needed. and really laid that out, understood kind of what's a logical job progression. You know, how does somebody move from an entry-level machinist to a more advanced machinist and onward and upward. And then we compared that to our landscape of education and training programs in the region. And we did a little bit of a quality check too with our manufacturers. And a good example is one of the first things that we heard was, you know, we get a different quality of a student coming out of this career center than that career center. So we are 3 counties. We have 4 different high school career and technical center programs. And obviously those are the most sought after students. But, you know, if one manufacturer is on the border and drawing from 2, why is student A only getting so far and student B is not? So we went through a process where we engaged the schools, gave them some feedback about what we were hearing, uncovered kind of root causes, which included variations in instructor capabilities as one thing. So, you know, we worked with the schools to make sure that the instructors had the same credentials that we would want the students to have. We asked the career centers to build in credentials into their programs as another way to assure quality. You know, if the students can earn these credentials, that tells us that they're at this level versus this level. So that career pathways systems approach has really served us well. Now, you know, fast forward to a year ago when robotics started to come to the forefront even more. We did that same landscape assessment, and guess what? We had 0 robotics programs in our backyard. But we were hearing increasingly that manufacturers were, you know, putting pretty heavy capital investment into robotics, but didn't have training programs to introduce their current workforce to the skills they needed, let alone a pipeline of talent. So we took a look at our training providers. It could have been the community college, it could have been the career center, brought them in a room, talked about it, and that's the level of trust we have now with our education partners. The community college said, you know, in this particular instance, I think the career center is better suited. They've got an instructor. Go ahead and, you know, we'll come on board if you need us for something else, but we're going to focus in this area. So by taking this systems approach, we're also eliminating duplication. I think somebody said that earlier. Like, we can't afford to duplicate efforts because there's a lot of work to do, right? And we can't afford to have, you know, a classroom over here half full and a classroom over there half full. Let's make sure that we have one program that is full. And so, so that's one thing that has been a strategy that has served us well, is kind of taking that approach and making sure that, you know, those programs kind of stack on each other and all make sense within our community. We also have done a lot of work with talent pipelines, which is probably the biggest thing that's on everybody's mind, right? How do we get additional people into the pipeline of talent? And so we've got 2 primary strategies. One is our pre-apprenticeship program. So we work with the high school career and technical centers, and we have established formal pre-apprenticeship programs where they're best and the brightest. You know, we're all competing for those career and technical center students who are highly sought after. A differentiator for our companies are those that have registered apprenticeship programs can go into the career centers and say, we would love to have you come into our facilities and work as a pre-apprentice. We have a structured program. You'll have a mentor. You'll be with us, you know, starting in the summer between your junior and senior year. And that can continue, and they can clearly show that pre-apprentice that there is an advancement path because they could then become an apprentice. Excuse me. So that's one that's worked out really well. We also are big fans of the mentorship program, the information that you have in your packet, which is an alternate way to reach into high school talent. So for those students that are not part of a career and technical center program, that manufacturing mentor program now allows you to hire students under 18 into manufacturing by just having some safety classes, a mentor assigned, and a few, you know, small measures to be able to get those students in and working for you in the summertime or after school or on the weekends, which is a great way to let them see manufacturing firsthand and start to make those connections, which hopefully, you know, pans out after graduation as well. So that's our first talent pipeline. We also wanted to make sure that we had a talent pipeline for adults, and especially now with all of this churn in the labor market, we want to make sure we can capture them and get them going. So we have a program called Work Advance where we do a lot with outreach and recruitment. We have a network, a really broad network of partners that helps us to recruit. So we start with the company's commitment, and we'll say, these are for entry-level positions. We may have 3 manufacturers that are all committed to hiring out of this Work Advanced program. So we start with that, we understand their requirements, we understand what they're looking for, and we design the program accordingly. When we're recruiting, it's important to be real specific about what the jobs are, what the pay is, what the advancement opportunities are, and that sort of thing. And we use our network of partners to help us to get the word out. We actually just hired one of the nonprofits to do grassroots outreach for us, and what that means is they are literally going door to door in neighborhoods talking about manufacturing. They're going into churches, they're going into Dunkin' Donuts, they're going into the grocery stores, and they're talking about manufacturing. And when they get a hot lead, we have a program ready to go that's kind of short-term boot camp style. Here's what workplace readiness is, the soft skills that we all talk about, and then here's some foundational safety and what manufacturing is, just to get that person who might have been working in retail or fast food enough of a foundation so that they can come in and get going. And then we give them a career coach. So that career coach stays with them for up to a year, and that's a resource for the manufacturer and that supervisor. So the first time there's a little bit of a red flag or yellow flag that goes up, they show up late or something like that, then they have a coach as a resource. So those are our 2 pipeline strategies. We do other things for upskilling, registered apprenticeship, non-registered apprenticeship. We're always working with our education partners to create and tailor programs and make sure that they're offered at times and places that are conducive to our existing workers, and then also those that are coming into the pipeline. So I think if our manufacturers were here, what they would tell you has been their experience, or what the benefit of working together as an industry sector partnership would be is they have a louder voice now, so that they're able to kind of shape these solutions, get the attention of some of these partners, get things done more quickly. That robotics program that I talked about, we were able to implement in 9 months. We've had 36 people go through it. All the companies access tech cred, so it was free to them. And we couldn't have done that if we hadn't been working together all this time. There are some efficiencies. We do a ton of youth outreach and community outreach. We're the clearinghouse for those requests that come in from the school. If we have a teacher that says, I'd love for a manufacturer to come in and talk to my class, they call us, and then we have a speakers bureau of our manufacturers, and so we can say, hey, we've got a school in Brookfield, that's your backyard, would you like to go and speak to them? And that evens out the burden, so it doesn't fall on any one manufacturer as well. So efficiencies and so forth. They'd also say, and I heard just the other day actually, what the greatest compliment I think I've ever received is one of our manufacturers said, MVMC we are idea generators. And I thought that was so cool that they turn to us to help them think differently. So we bring together manufacturing roundtable discussions. We just had one most recently on job quality. How do you show a high level of job quality? It's not just about the wages, and so if you're constrained by wages, there are lots of other things that you can do to show job quality and be competitive. And so we bring in a speaker and we talk about an idea, but then they share with each other. You wouldn't think that with competitors, but obviously you're all here today. So, so that was one of the coolest things that I've heard. So I'll leave you with another quote. I'm stealing heavily from the Lieutenant Governor today, channeling my best John Husted, I guess. But he said, those who collaborate best win. And he says that often. And when he talks about that, he's talking about, yes, manufacturing may be competing with other industries, but he's also talking about Ohio competing with China and really being competitive in the world marketplace. And so I would echo that and encourage you to think about what collaboration can continue to evolve and look like here in Tuscarawas County. Obviously, this forum is a great step forward, and it's exciting to be here and be a part of it. So I hope that this has been helpful. If we have time, maybe a few questions if you want. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. So first of all, I want to thank you for your comments today. I'm Chanel Lee, I'm with Magnet. We have not officially met in person, but we just started a sector partnership, a manufacturing sector partnership in Canton. And we worked a lot with your office to do some best practices to get it started along with the Ohio Manufacturers Association. So everything you talked about that you're doing here, we're doing that in Stark County. We just started in in March of this year it launched, so I think we're the 13th sector partnership across the state. So thank you and for all your work and all the best practices. You were very helpful for us as we got started.
Good.
And so along with Magnet, the Chamber, the Stark Economic Development Board, we are the 3 intermediaries that work with the manufacturers. It is a manufacturing-led organization. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, and that's a great example. So I have been on the phone with the leaders there in that Stark County Industry Sector Partnership, and we actually shared our curriculum for the robotics operator program. So those are some of the ways that we can be working together to fast track some of these solutions because we're working together and all networked together. So you guys are certainly welcome to be a part of that statewide network. That's great. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm Bob Olson. I'm Buckeye Career Center. Your 16 and 17-year-olds go into the workplace. How do you overcome some of the company's limitations on their insurance or their workers' comp insurance, I guess, the carrier and those barriers?
Right. It's a question that comes up often, and it's mainly one of education. That it is possible. So even just having the information like you have in front of you that, I think sometimes I have encountered that some of our manufacturers thought that it wasn't allowable from a legal standpoint. So once we get past that to say there are a couple different channels. If they're a career and tech student, they are definitely allowable. Now, with this legislation, if you have the safety protocols in place and a mentor, then you're allowable that way. So that's the first part. And then oftentimes it's a matter of the company actually needs to advocate with their insurance. The insurance isn't really the decider of that decision. They're not the responsible person to make that decision. They just would prefer that a student not be in there. So I think the company needs to understand that and communicate to the insurance company that there are these safety protocols in place. We're part of a structured program, and 9 times out of 10 that has resolved the issue. I think they need to be motivated. So now their manufacturers are certainly highly motivated to get connected to these young people, and so we're seeing more and more of those conversations happen with their insurance brokers. Jennifer?
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Meade-Deals with the Workforce Board. Jessica, from your experiences with your industry sector partnership, what could you relay to the human resource capital in this room around kind of coaching? So someone might say, why would I want to participate and share my expertise in a collaborative when company A might start stealing my employees? What are some experiences that you've seen there?
That's a great question. So Dale Forrester is one of our other founding members, and she says sometimes when she gets that question that it still happens, we just feel bad about it now. And that's kind of the reality. But it's not, the thing is, it's happening now, and it doesn't get any worse when you come together. In fact, it gets better because you have some relationships and, have some of, are able to, to chat about it in a reasonable way. So it's a reality. And so the philosophy that our members had was we need to grow the pool. We can't quit stealing from each other and just churning the same pool, especially now that it's shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. We need to increase the top of the sales funnel, the top of the talent recruitment funnel. And the best way to do that is to have a louder voice. And we can get the attention of the community and young people and people that influence young people much more effectively if we work together. We're on the news all the time. We're out there in the community at community events. And, an individual manufacturer, as an example, could but might not have the resources to contract with this nonprofit that we just did to go out in the community and knock on doors. We can collectively, because we were able to attract some grant resources, because we demonstrated collaboration, we have the private investment from our companies, so you get much more momentum and are able to affect the pool if you collaborate. Yeah, great question though. Anything else? Make sure you guys stay on track today. So, all right, well, thanks so much. Happy to be here.